So we've got it on the lift now. This is the blue high top. Just having a look to see what maybe I'm missing. Looks like it's got a good steering box in it. There's no sway bar. That's where it bolts up right there. Comes down here. JA11 doesn't always use a sway bar when it's been doing off-road stuff and such, but I don't think this one has. Do you see a little bitty rust hole right there? It's actually quite big, but I can fix that. Motor mounts look like they're, or body mounts look like they're pretty rough. A little bit of rust around the drain hole. Not bad. That's kind of surface. It looks like it might have had a coating on it before. It's missing the crossbar here. There's no transmission, obviously. Oh, it still has the shifter cable, but it's missing the bar for it, or the engagement. And that clutch looks, or that flywheel looks done. It might clean up. We turned it. The bolts are all right. It's got a muffler. That's the plus. Actually, I'm going to put another muffler on it. I got a little hole right there. But, I mean, it's a pretty good muffler all the way to the back. Let's see what else. I mean, it does still have all the radiator and stuff in it. This is really not that complicated. It looks like they just took the transmission, the clutch, and the turbo. Might have been some new parts or something. There's no transfer or brackets for transfer. There's that. Panels here look pretty good. Nothing major on that side. Nothing too major on this side. A little bit there, not that bad. Oh, the shocks look pretty good, and they're Suzy Sport, yeah. They're dampening adjustable. They're probably not long shocks or anything like that. But I don't think, I think these are factory springs. It's just, or they may be like 1 inch, because he gave me paperwork for these springs. The back shackles look OEM, but the fronts are not. The fronts are, oh, that looks OEM too, to be honest. Oh yeah, these look OEM. Oh, what in the... Okay. Yeah. Straight to the scrap pile when the lift comes in. Oh, yeah. I love these kind of things where the shock just moves up and down in there. That's dope. Let's see the side. Cool. I mean, you can change these bushings out fairly easy. So if the shocks are actually still good, you could still use them on something else, something that's not lifted or whatever. I mean, relatively speaking, shocks are pretty cheap, but there's the speed sensors there. That's good. There's that middle bleeder. If you're wanting to bleed your brakes, this is the one that I was talking about in a previous video that you need to make sure you bleed. It's got the factory lines on it. There's the fuel filter. There is a tank in it. I'm very curious to know if the tank... Is there a cap on this? There's a cap on it. I wonder if that tank's any good. Looks pretty good up in there. Tanks are kind of a expensive thing these days. I like the ones that come with the drain here, especially if you're doing off-roading and stuff and you get water in it. You can just drain the tank out. It's got the plug here, but there's no light. metal bumper that's been beat up. Yeah, I kind of dig the OEM wheels. I like when they're painted. That's pretty cool. I don't know if we're gonna cut. We usually, well, I wouldn't say we usually, but a lot of times we'll cut this section out, and they have a piece because there's nothing underneath this. They have a piece that goes here, and it looks really good. Let's see if there's another Jimny right. Oh yeah, here we go. See, like this, to kind of keep it from hitting the wheels there. I think that looks pretty good. That is a. We'll come back to this Jimny in a little bit, but that is a tank guard right there. Look how thick that is. It's a big boy right there. But we'll come back to this Jimny. But for now, we're focusing on this one. We're gonna get him some good off-road tires, a nice lift, a clutch, a turbo, transmission. I've got a bunch of good transfer cases and transmissions just hanging out there waiting to go into something. We'll get him some drive shafts. Oh, looks like you still got the e-brake cable. Most of the stuff that is here that's a pain in the butt to find. Yeah. It looks like we'll go online and start ordering some stuff. Anyway, that's it for now. I was gonna say one last thing. I just turned it to lock out the hub, and then turned out the lock here. This one was a little hard to turn, and if we turn it here, they should both turn together, and they don't turn at all. So I'm thinking this one's probably all right. Yeah, this one probably needs to be cleaned. It's, oh man, yeah, it's pretty tight. So one thing that's important, before you ever try to go off-road, you do need to check these. All you gotta do is pull this off right here on these, take it out, and it's just a little spring, and you know, just clean it out real good and clean it off. Just make sure you keep an eye on the orientation so you put it back correctly. There's a little seal that goes here too. And if the seal's torn up, mud and water gets inside, then it rusts, and then the four-wheel drive won't engage. So make sure you do that. That's an easy maintenance thing you can do. But yeah, look at those brakes. Nice and crusty. Let's look at, ooh. Yeah, that'll wear off when we start driving it. Anyway, not too bad. So today we're gonna work on the frame here, and all I'm gonna do on this part of it, I've already got like a little top coating on here. I'm gonna go through and see if there's any spots that need to be kind of cleaned up a little bit. The reason I put this top paint on there is I let it sit out for a few days, and you know, let it get rained on and stuff. And if anything starts to come through like that right there, just go back over the top of it and clean it, and make sure that it's protected. You can see right here where the paint is kind of worn off there. Nothing too, you know, important, just something I like to do. So I'm gonna go through with a hand paint and get some places that I can't get with the spray, and you know, coat it up real good. And then I'm gonna come back over the top of it with a textured coating, just to make it a little bit nicer. So I'm also gonna weld. I'm gonna cut these off since it's got some rust here. I'm gonna cut this off and here because I want to keep these for toe points. So I'm gonna cut that off and put a straight plate down there, weld that in. I'm gonna do that on both sides. This side, it's all right. I don't know if I'm gonna cut this side or not, but just to make it match, I might. Then from there, I'm gonna go ahead and do the rear wheel bearings and change the pads and such. So that's what the plan is today. All right, so I've got these made here. Not amazing, but should do for now. Fix that little rust that we had there. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna pressure wash it, and then I'm going to check for any other rust spots and maybe use a little sealer to seal in some places on it that I feel need to be sealed up. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the thick hand brush paint on it. And while I'm letting that dry, I'll work on the brakes. I just opened this one up already just to kind of take a look. I'll put that cover back on there. But yeah, I'm not really worried about painting this because it's the diff. And I'm not worried about painting the springs because we're going to change those out. So I'm just mainly worried about the frame. So we're going to go from there, see what we got. I'm definitely going to power wash around this area because that's something I'm going to work on next is the kingpins. I don't know how good these are, but I'm going to change them anyway. So I want that to be clean so it'll be easy to work on. But then, like I said, I'm not going to clean this or paint this. I'm just going to clean it real good. So if I need to work on it, it'll be easier. I'm mostly worried about the frame. And the frame's pretty clean already because we've already put a coat on there and we've already grinded it down, just kind of get some of that dust and dirt off of it before we paint it again. All right, so now I've got it washed off. And you know what? I changed my mind. I think this would look so much better with a painted differential. So I went ahead and just sprayed that off, and I'll come back and put some cleaner on it and make it real clean before I paint it. I may even wait until I do the lift. And when I do the lift, I'll take the shackles off of it, then I can just paint it all at one time. I'm not gonna go too crazy with the paint on it, but you know, just get it kind of cleaned there. So what kind of head we use? We don't use a regular pressure washer head. We use this one right here, and it kind of vibrates and sprays in a circular motion, but it will let you know where you've got some problems. So one of the reasons we do the coating first of just light paint is it will show us where we need to continue working. So you can see it's pulled it off here, which means this wasn't cleaned as good as it could be. So now it's pretty good, but we may have to come back and work on some areas like that. You can see on the side here, it's pretty good, right? So it's something we don't need to work on. But there's a couple of areas, you know, like this and things like that where the paint flaked off real easy because maybe we need to do a little bit more work on those. So that's why I like to do that. You can see right here. Because if you were to go ahead and paint it, you know, with a can or whatever, and then, you know, 6 months down the road, maybe that'll happen. Maybe it'll just chip off. So this kind of lets us know where we need to work. But yeah, it looks pretty good. Not too bad. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let it dry in the sun, and I'm going to work on the back brakes while I do that. And then later on this evening, I will come back and put the hand paint, and then I will do the texture on it. So I got the rear brake off and the axle out. You can see inside here, it's broke. All right, so that's not good. So it would probably quickly leak. And I hadn't done nothing, just pulled it out. So it's broke inwards. So there's that, and this seal looks pretty rough. I'm gonna drain the oil in the diff too and put some new oil in there. Make sure you put sealant here when you put these back in. That's how they seal. I did have to cut this e-brake pin out because it was just rusted. And then another thing I noticed, where's the axle? Here it is. So you can check here too, and if there's any play, like here you can see the play a little bit, so that means this bearing is ready to go. This is just the collar. You do have to force this down back on there when you put a new one on. Believe it or not, to get this off, you have to cut this one off. And then you can kind of pop the bearing off or cut the bearing off. This will not come off unless these two things are off. So when you're putting these back on, don't forget to put this back on if you've taken it off. In this case, I'm going to replace this one because it's rusty here and here. Pretty bad. You can see where I had to cut that. The pads actually look pretty good on this thing, but you know, it doesn't matter. We're gonna fix that anyway. But the axle looks good. No problem with that. Sometimes they'll be shredded or sheared at the end, but this one probably hasn't seen too much off-roading. But anyway, so there's that. See how that looks. The Samurai should be the exact same or fairly close to it. You can see there's quite a bit of pad left on these. Everything else was pretty good on it. It looked pretty clean inside, but yeah, that bearing is it's definitely time to be changed. You can see some movement there. So we're gonna go ahead and do that and put a new plate on there, and we'll get that part back together, and then we'll go for the other side. Well, looking pretty snazzy. I haven't done this yet. I'm gonna wait and do those later. But yeah, the brush part is done. And the coating part, I should say, and it really does look pretty good. The good thing about using the brush is you can kind of get where you want, don't have to worry about, you know, as long as you got a small enough brush, you can get things that you don't want to get paint on, you can kind of leave them alone, whereas you can't do that with the spray always. So you'll see a little bit of streaks there sometimes, and you know, every once in a while you'll get a run or something. But when I put the textured coating on there, you won't see that anymore. This is just to protect the frame. You know, you about can't scratch down to the metal with this stuff. So yeah, so far so good. Nice and shiny. It won't be after we do the coating. It'll be kind of a, you know, kind of a faded black, but that's all right. Very glossy right now, but anyway. All right, so I've got the rear bearings removed here. I've already got the seals ready to go. Got the rear bearings removed here. Hacked them all up. This is really the way you got to do it. So what you do is you just come in real slow and you cut through both of them until you can get them off. And I've got a couple of chisels here. I use this chisel here that it's kind of thin but heavy duty. You can get between it and just pop it with the hammer. It was funny because this one is the holder for the bearing and it comes off pretty easy. And the bearing itself, you just have to cut away the rest of it until you can actually get to the bearing. And I cut it at an angle, that way I can kind of get between here. You see, a little bit, not bad. Scarred that up a little bit, but I didn't get the actual shaft, which is what's important. Remember, I changed this because the other one was rusty, so this is actually from another Jimny over there. It's funny because I chiseled this piece with the chisel and then it was stuck on there and I just pulled it off. And when I laid it on the ground, I guess there was some pressure on it and it popped off and flew around the shop over there, which is kind of funny. But anyway, you do have to clean the gasket material here because you're going to put new gasket, just some sealer on it before you put it back on. So you do have to do that. And then, yeah, so there's the bearing. Just try your best not to scar that up. I mean, if you do a little bit with the grinder, that's okay. Just take your time and cut it off, no big deal. So I'm going to clean that up. And oh, here's another thing. So what I did here was, to keep from messing these studs up, is I cut a little square for the bolts, a little hard to see, into the wood. And I've used this wood I don't know how many times for the same project. And then I just put the studs in there because when you put the new one on, you basically have to beat it back into place too. You'll put the bearing on there. And a little trick that I've learned, you put the bearing back on there, the new one, and then you take this old one, because the old, I guess, I don't know what you call this, holder brace bearing, and stick it on there and use a pipe or something to put over the end, and you can just hammer down on that and it'll push that other bearing down in there as far as it needs to go. And then you can just take it off real easy again because it's got a cut in it. And then put your new one back on there and use this again to push the new one back on there. Or you could even, I guess, put the bearing down on there, put the new one on there, and then push it with this one. That'd probably be a more feasible way to do it. But those are just a couple of tricks if you try to do this on your own. So here's pretty close to finished product. I still got to go over it a couple more times. You see it's not really that shiny anymore, but it's got the texture on it. I might go over it one more coat. But yeah, looking pretty good, almost there. So this is my stupid thing I came up with. That it's not stupid, it works, but here's the pipe, and it's got something jammed down in there to bang on with the mini sledge. And underneath, you've got the old bearing, and it just comes off real easy because it's cut. Right? And then you've got your new bearing, and the old bearing just pushes perfectly around the new bearing, which doesn't damage it. And you just bang on it until you make it flush there. And then you're ready to go. There she be. All right? Pull that off. That one holds that one down on there. Make sure it doesn't go up and down. If it goes up and down a little bit, you may have to continue going because it's really hard to tell. Actually, I might need to go back down a little bit on that one. See, there's a tiny little bitty gap there. So I might need to go a little bit more. But yeah, that's basically it on that. The cutting is the hardest part. So that's for our frame project. Then we've got this one. I'm not going to change the back bearings in this one. You know, they might need it, they might not. It only has 80,000 kilometers, so I'm just going to leave those. I'm going to check the front wheel bearings, and I think I've checked them already. They feel pretty good. It doesn't move or anything. So if they're not that bad on this one, they're pretty well greased. They're a little dirty, but I'm just going to go ahead and put that together. This one's a little bit of a time sensitive thing, so I did just get the clutch today. So they have a few different types of clutches for F6A and K6A, I guess so. So the 3-spring disc are a little weak. I've burned up a lot of clutches, I'll just say that, and that's the reason I know. The 3-spring are ones that, you know, they're not that good of quality. And this one wasn't real expensive. I think you can get this one, I forget how much we paid for this one. But this is a 4-spring. I recommend at least a 4-spring. The 3-spring, we've got a wall of shame over here with the 3 springs on it. You can see this one, that's a 3-spring. I mean, that's, you know, it's going pretty hard, but, you know, not really that bad. I mean, the springs are bigger. There's another one around here somewhere. Nah, no, whatever. Anyway, so that's the new clutch for this one, which means I can go ahead and get started on this one too. And then it comes with a pressure plate, a throw-out bearing, and there should be a pilot bearing here somewhere. You have to buy one of those separate. They're like, oh shoot, drop this up. They're like 300 yen. It might be in this box here. So there's an old type and a new type of pilot bearing too. I'm sorry, not pilot bearing, throw-out bearing. And this is the new type. If your Jimny is rocking the original clutch, hopefully not, but if it is, or something from that time period, you're probably going to see a different throw-out bearing, but this is the right one. So anyway, there's a couple updates on that. Now what I'm going to do is clean this up, lube it real good, and these things, they just stick right back into the axle, and then they bolt down to the axle from here, and I'll put the brake assembly all back together, and that'll be it. I don't know if I'm gonna get to the brakes today because it's getting dark and I'm ready to move on to something else. So I may just get the axles in and bolt it up and then come back to the brakes on another day. All right, so we got it bolted up. I always put the sealer on the housing first and not on this. That way, you know, if I'm moving it around or fumbling around with it, it's not getting everywhere. You do kind of have to hold this in place though, so it doesn't bump up against it and kind of mess up the sealer line that you have. The way I normally get these axles back in, they go in real easy, but I just line them up as best I can. I'm gonna put a punch here in the middle and take a hammer and just kind of tap it, and it should just go right in. And you'll know if you're lined up, if the hoses come into play here, and then all your stuff lines up here. That's pretty much it. I'm gonna put the other side in, I'm gonna put the other axle in and do the same thing. And then I'm gonna put the wheel on both sides temporarily with the drum, just until I can get back to it and finish the rear brakes on it. So the next time around, I will, the axle doesn't, I sprayed a little bit, it doesn't look too bad, but I'm gonna come back and repaint both the axles. I'm gonna clean them up real good and repaint those. I do have a few spots underneath I want to touch up on, especially where I had it on the forklift and stuff on the very bottom. And I didn't really do too much around here because we're going to put a new lift on this, and I'm going to be scratching it all up and everything. So when I take the old suspension off, I'll paint all up in there, and then once I put the new stuff on, I'll tape it off and kind of touch it up there. I mean, I don't want it to be too perfect, you know, because I'm sure this won't see a lot of off-road, but I know it'll see a little bit, I'm sure. So, you know, I don't want to, you know, do all this work and then it gets all scuffed and scraped. So I'm gonna take good care of it, but I'm not gonna go too nitpicky, because man, if I want to, I'll go down that rabbit hole. There we are, 6 months later, still working on the same thing. So that's it for now. That's it for this week. I'll come back to it next week and hopefully come back to the other one next week. And appreciate you watching.